buildings, lots of taxes, there's issues with zoning, all these types of problems. Getting mortgages can be a problem for entrepreneurs. So again, because of the fact that you haven't made any sales yet, so the bank is kind of thinking, well, will this company be able to generate cash to pay me back? Or are they never going to be able to? This is the other point here is oftentimes what happens with the entrepreneurs. We try to avoid buying facilities, mainly because we don't usually have $1 million or $2 sitting around, or $2 million or $5 million or whatever. So oftentimes we have leasing. Sometimes even for really like at the very, very sort of early stages, it might even be like the entrepreneur working in his basement or her basement. The last thing is lengthy product development cycles. So what this means is it might take a long time to, let's say, develop a new computer program, right? Or if you're some sort of small, innovative company that's working on some sort of, let's say, new drug or something, then obviously you can't just say, oh, I have a new drug, and we go sell it. There's testing of the drug, making sure there's no bad side effects, getting regulatory approval, and so on. So it could also be, let's say you're designing the product, and then the customer, let's say, there was an example I remember in one of the textbooks, in the third-year textbook, where they were designing this sort of solar-powered, environmentally friendly garbage compactor. And so they designed it, installed it at sort of their first customer, who kind of helped pay them, gave some money up front to help the entrepreneurs pay for the design, the development of the product. They installed it, but it had certain problems. I think it was very heavy or something to get the garbage out afterwards or something. There were certain design issues. So then they had to go redesign it again. That, of course, takes time, and, of course, redesigning things, installing it, letting the customers play around with it, use it, then redesigning it again, then reinstalling it, making the second version, then reinstalling it again. That, of course, takes time and money. So that's another reason why. And also, keep in mind that it's not just the cost of making that garbage compactor round one, then making the modified version round two. There's steel and metal and all that production costs, but also the labor costs, right? Your employees that you're hiring would like to get paid over this maybe 6-month development process, so you got to pay them as well. So that, of course, requires cash, and before we even sold the product, so to speak. Okay, so the next slide. Again, we are always concerned about looking at other firms. Okay, this is more for the investor, right? The potential investor who's looking at your plan, but it's also helpful for you as the entrepreneur, right? Like, do you want to invest your time and your money, could be even your life savings, in this business venture? Right, if you're looking at other companies that are sort of maybe possibly somewhat similar to yours, and the people who are running them are not making a lot of money, they're not particularly rich, then maybe you don't want to invest your money into it. The other thing you have to worry about when comparing your financial numbers, your ratios, remember we talked about the 5 different types of ratios, those short-term and long-term liquidity and solvency ratios, the profitability margins, the efficient use of assets, and so on, is all these perceptual distortions. I can't, of course, teach you all of them right now, or this is going to be a 7-hour movie, but one of them is optimism bias. Right? This is sort of an irrational belief everything's going to work out wonderfully. The first time we run our prototype is going to work. Customers are going to love our product. Well, maybe they're not all going to love it. So there's sort of a bias. Everything's going to be great. We're going to make tons of sales. Everything's going to grow. These types of things. There's sort of a rule of thumb that says, when you're dealing with projections, those pro formas, you think that to yourself as an investor, the entrepreneur is probably being a little bit too optimistic in the numbers. You might want to tack them down. Another thing, of course, is planning fallacy. This is basically saying that there's a bias towards thinking you can do a lot more in a certain amount of time than you really can. It's sort of like my syllabus. I thought I'd get a few more chapters in. Apparently not. Oh well. Confirmation bias. So this is sort of, we see things that sort of confirm or enforce what we already believe. So if we already believe that, for instance, we're going to have 10% growth, and we only tend to see the things that reconfirm our notion of growth and kind of downplay, don't quite as focus on, emphasize all the things that suggest that recessions and downturns in the economy are going to obviously undermine your optimistic growth projections. We talked about growth rates of sales before. Another one could be, at what they call affect infusion. Affect, spelled with an A, A-F-F-E-C-T, is basically feelings. We tend to, if you're in a good mood, you think everything's going to work out great. You perceive things, in this case, the financial projections, in a positive light. If you're in a bad mood, you tend to be a little bit more cynical and negative. So you got to factor all these things in as the writer or as the potential investor reading this, saying that you could make these things. And there's a whole bunch of other potential perceptual biases. This is actually what they call the cognitive foundations, or the stuff in your head issues that can go on. Now, in this section, I'm talking about overall attractiveness of the proposed venture from the financial perspective, as opposed to I did in the previous slides. We looked at it from the point of the industry attractiveness, the attractiveness, is it an early life cycle, rapid growth rates, not a lot of competitors. This is the financial perspective instead. Okay. And so we're looking at rates of return. Okay, so again, these are all ratios. ROA stands for return on assets, right? ROE is return on equity, and then of course return on sales is return on sales. So these are basically just different numbers that come out of computers that are used. Ideally, you want to have bigger ratios, right? So like take the classic one is return on equity. So if I'm putting in some money, like as an investor in stocks, then I want to get maybe 10% return every year, or 20%. Higher is usually better. That's normally we're talking about ratios of return. We want to have big returns. Okay, so that is that. These are just numbers we look at. Again, we're looking at growth rates again. See, like we talked about, growth rates of sales, growth rates of prices, growth rates of lots of things. A very important concept. Right? It's always that delta x divided by x. Right? So it's always the change in the variable divided by the original value of the variable. And we're looking for 5 to 7 years. We're looking for clearly defined niches. So we want to have a nice positive number that we can reliably and credibly believe is going to stay positive for like 7 years into the future. Obviously, that there's some risk to that because things can change in the future. And do we have a clearly defined niche? So we have a little bit of that Michael Porter SWOT analysis. We want to make sure there's not too many threats of new entrants. Do we have those barriers of entry kind of come sneaking back in here? Yeah, I mentioned before about what I called, the lifetime value of the customer, right? So we're not thinking of, okay, Bob comes in, buys something from us, and that's it, sort of a very transactional perspective. We're thinking about Bob buying stuff for maybe in the next 20 years, right? So this is what they call recurring revenue, lifetime value of the customer, this kind of idea, that we can get the same people coming back again and again and again. Whole bunch of good reasons for that. If the person's always happy about the service we provide, then they might tell their friends. Good, positive word of mouth. It helps build your reputation, right? If you have